Battlefield 6 and Black Ops 7, some of the newest contenders in the FPS genre, as well as coming out fairly close to each other. I'm pretty sure Black Ops 7 comes out November 14th and Battlefield 6 comes out October 10th, but I'm recording this a couple days before Battlefield 6 comes out. I'm recording this on October 6th, so by the time this video is out, Battlefield might be out, but I digress. However, there is one overlying issue. Both games have a almost cult-like following, with Call of Duty's Black Ops 7 beta recently going live. And the problem with that, Call of Duty players suck at Call of Duty. Within literal hours, there were already sightings of hackers, and I'm not going to act like the Battlefield 6 beta didn't have its fair share of hackers. There were. But the problem is, one thing is that no one can really agree on which game is better. And I'm not going to act like I'm the most intelligent on the matter. I'm not. I'm just some random high schooler with an opinion. But that's what this app is for, right? Anyway, so the problem is, since no one can agree on which game is better, Battlefield 6 is a lot more grounded and realistic, while Black Ops 7 is more arcade-like and more gamer-oriented. Me personally, I prefer Battlefield 6 over the Call of Duty franchise. I've always kind of preferred Battlefield over COD, but that can really happen to anyone. But the reason why is because I just like the gameplay better. I don't like how in Call of Duty you can slide cancel with a TTK of like half a second and get 107 kills on shipment in 3 minutes. While in Battlefield, there's actual skill required because there's 4 different classes usually. I'm looking at you, Battlefield 2042. But usually there's 4 different classes, and these 4 different classes are usually the Assault class, Support class, Sniper class, and Engineer class. These classes are usually fairly balanced, and each class has its own buffs for using certain weapons, and each class has its own class-locked gadgets. For example, the Engineer can repair vehicles and destroy vehicles. But on that note, I'd also like to mention how Battlefield has vehicles in the default mode. Default mode is usually a 64 versus 64 team mode where you're trying to capture points. And I like that because it gives it an actual objective other than to run around, put your crosshair over someone, and pull the trigger. It's more complicated than that. And playing the Battlefield 6 beta, I noticed there was a couple people who were trying to slide cancel. I will try and find footage of this, but it was really funny because they were trying to do it and it wasn't working because, as the Call of Duty players put it, the movement felt too clunky and they couldn't do this and they couldn't do that. Like, I'm sorry you couldn't bunny hop and like 360 no scope with your mouse sensitivity at max. I'm sorry, but Battlefield is more lenient to the casual players, not the sweaty ones. And I'd also like to mention the DLC packs, which are outrageous, Activision. Like, why is Beavis and Butthead in the same game as Captain Price? This doesn't make sense. It needs to be more realistic and grounded. Not, here, let's put random cartoon character next to Ghost. Or let's put Nicki Minaj on the same team as Beavis. You catch my drift? It doesn't make sense. Battlefield, however, has a more realistic approach with operator skins. They usually have more realistic and grounded, and I'm not going to act like Battlefield is the most realistic and tactically intense FPS game ever. It's not, but it's a heck of a lot better than COD. And I get Call of Duty was never meant to be this realistic, tactical FPS game, but, you know, credit's due. You see, the problem with this is that now everyone thinks every game has to be just like Call of Duty if it's an FPS game. Because if it's not, it must be bad. Oh no. But I'm rambling on a lot about stuff that doesn't really matter. Let's get into the parts that actually do matter. Like skill-based matchmaking. Now, the problem with this Call of Duty, it doesn't work. Like, I get where you guys had the idea and the vision, but how is your name Activision, but you've lost your active vision? You know, it doesn't make sense. Skill-based matchmaking was meant to balance out the game and make everything more fair. But when it doesn't work, it doesn't make sense to still include it. Because explain to me why I do bad 5 games in a row. It puts me in a match full of people who just downloaded the game or just bots in general. And then I do good. And by do good, I mean I get like 30 kills on Nuketown. And then it puts me in a match full of people who no life the game and are Crimson. This doesn't make sense. In Battlefield, there is no skill-based matchmaking, and I like to think this is because of the 64 versus 64 concept. It would be too hard to implement a ranked mode with such a large group of players. You'll never experience a true full lobby unless you're in unranked. And even then, that'll only work for like the first 2 weeks the season is out. After that, it's impossible. And I'm pretty sure to even start, for the game to start, there needs to be at least 32 people on each team. Now that is, I'm pretty sure, it might be more, but, I'm pretty sure. But another thing is the graphics. Oh boy. The graphics in Battlefield 6 look significantly better, and this might just be because we've had the same graphics for the past 5 Call of Duty games. Well, just about. Modern Warfare 2 2022, Modern Warfare 3 2023, Black Ops 6, and Black Ops 7 all look strikingly similar graphical-wise. They all look the exact same, and that's because Activision doesn't want to bother with the art style. All of the Call of Duty fanboys and glazers are used to this art style and don't want to deviate. But there's a problem with this. It gets stale and boring. But let's look at a different game. Let's look at Battlefield 6. Another realistic looking FPS game graphical wise. And you see the problem with this is it looks 1,000 times better. And it's made by EA. However, problem with Activision using the same graphics, it looks, realistic. But it gets stale. Like, all you have to do is, change the saturation a little bit, and maybe it'd look better. But another problem that Activision has is catering to old-gen consoles. Why is Black Ops 7 releasing on the PS4 and Xbox One? I have no clue. Maybe it's just to make money. But it's the whole Black Ops 3 releasing on the PS3 and Xbox 360 all over again. If you're around for that, you remember how much of an absolute shit show that was. It looked horrible. And I'll put up some examples. I'll credit the people on screen and one of the corners. But the problem with this is that it doesn't make sense to keep catering to these old gen consoles. It's the whole point when no one is upgrading to these newer gen consoles is because all the latest games are eventually coming out to the old gen consoles. Look at Marvel Rivals. That game was supposed to be top of the line. Well, not really, but it was only on the PS5 and Xbox Series X and S and PC for quite some time until randomly they announced it was coming to the Xbox One and PS4. Notice a theme? They keep catering, and I don't like it. No one really likes it unless you're stuck there. And the excuse that they always try and use is, oh well, I can't afford new gen consoles. Which I get. It took me a while. But the problem is you have to eventually upgrade. You can't stay with the same PS4 you've had since 2013. You have to upgrade eventually. But another problem is that Black Ops 7 is way too sweaty. See, the problem with this is that there's really no way to justify having a game in its beta and having meta weapons. It doesn't really make sense. Why is this a thing? I do not know. Because Call of Duty players need to have neuron activation 24/7 or else they get bored, because one hand is using the controller and the other hand is scrolling TikTok. They have the attention span of a bee and they need to stay stimulated. So Call of Duty adds all these flashy colors and brand new battle passes every single waking moment, and it gets old really fast. But yeah. Anyways, I think that's going to have to wrap up this video. I don't want it to be too long and I don't want it to be too short. So anyways, like and subscribe. And remember to watch my other videos. See you guys later. This has been Rad Fuzz. I'm out.